Hey class, welcome to week 5. We're going to be jumping into a 2-week project, starting on week 5, moving into week 6. And let's take a look at it. Just thinking back briefly, week 4 was an assignment that you really had to follow directions to get full points. Remember, watching those demo videos is really important. If you did get points off on that assignment, it was most likely because you did not measure properly or follow the directions in those early stages of that assignment. This assignment is also going to be very important to follow those directions, especially at the early stages. Once you kind of get going into the drawing, you can kind of take the reins from there. But the prelim will be very important. Let's take a look. Albrecht Dürer assignment. Albrecht Dürer was a printmaker. Most of his prints are from the early 1500s. He used a relief print, a woodblock print, which is the earliest type of printmaking. Actually developed in Japan, moved to Europe soon after. Um, Most of woodblock prints have really tight line quality, which is a really um, specific thing about that printmaking process, and we're going to try to emulate that process with our drawings on this assignment. Here are some examples of some of his prints. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, they're on the left. It's always a crowd favorite. Noticing how much detail is in these pieces sometimes intimidates people, but it is a really good assignment, and I think that if you follow the directions, you will impress yourself with your drawings. This is an artist named Tom Huck, a contemporary artist who still uses woodblock prints. You do not have to look at this, and we will actually not be using this for the assignment, but it's just a good resource to see examples that people are still using the same process of woodblock hundreds of years after it was invented. Thinking back to last week with the grayscales, developing the illusion of value from, say, a 1 to 10 using a mark making technique. We will be using hatching and cross hatching on this with the process of printmaking in a woodblock print. You can't really print halftones, but you will be able to develop value or the illusion of value shifts through mark making techniques and the density of those mark makings. Okay, so let's take a look at the assignment. You're going to get a copy of a woodblock print. You're going to print that out on a standard sheet of computer paper, 8.5 by 11. Also have to know the title and year. And then you're going to go from there using that as a source material. I have a link here. Also, there's a link back on the first page. That brings you to a definitive list of woodblock prints by Albrecht Dürer. As you scroll through here, you will see hundreds of examples. Do keep in mind this is a 2-week project, so we are going to try and find something that we can spend a good amount of time on. You might, as you scroll through here, start to get intimidated by some of this imagery. I'm going to recommend to just trust the process and realize that you can choose to omit certain details when the time comes. Say you're working with something like this and you're looking and you're saying, wow, there's 15 figures in this. You could choose to not include every single figure. Say like this figure here, you could add just value. But don't worry too much about the specifics of the drawing yet. What I want you to just try and do is find imagery that you might want to spend a good amount of time on drawing. Most weeks we've had this soft Tuesday due date for our discussion board. This week there will be a hard Tuesday due date where you are going to upload 2 or 3 images from this list with a few sentences. I'm going to give you feedback on those images as far as what I think will make the best drawing, and that will be the prelim for this week, due on Tuesday by midnight. From there, our first due date for this assignment, I'm actually going to be pushing back to Sunday before midnight, so a couple extra days. You'll get the weekend there. You're going to be doing a graphite sketch of your drawing. Once again, please watch the demo videos there. I break down source material with a basic grid, and we translate that grid to a larger piece of paper, and it's going to be much easier to see the specific details in your image. When looking at good student examples, Do keep in mind these are finished drawings. These are 2-week long drawings. This first week, once again, we're just going to be working in graphite. But what you see that works really well on these, well, there's a lot that works really well on these assignments, but line quality, proportions, and value. Those are the 3 things we're really focusing on these assignments. Proportions are going to be much easier to translate when we have a little grid. Once again, watching that video is going to be a huge help there, walking you through the best way to break down your image. The other thing we talked about, line quality, not going to be as big of an issue for this first week, but thinking forward, the artists have thicker lines on the bounding elements of these forms, which really helps your eye understand the space, and then thinner lines on the interior, which makes them sort of a secondary detail within those forms. So it's easy to understand what you're looking at, even though there's a lot of detail. We're thinking about that line quality throughout. I always like the rhino. It's got a really fun story. This is an example of taking a cropping of an image. It's not necessarily easier or harder to take a cropping, but it is allowed. This is the same image. You can see that this is just the bottom right of this full image. Couple things to think about here. If you take a full image, your eye will forgive imperfections. So if you really zoom in on this drawing on the left, you will see that there are some imperfections throughout it. But because there is so much detail, your eye forgives those imperfections and it just looks like an impressive drawing. That being said, if you take less of an image, you see it on the right side, those details become more important because there's less detail to kind of compare to. So you might look over here and say, ooh, the hand is a little bit odd because it's such a large element within the composition. When over here, I'm sure the hand also has some minor issues. Remember, we're not trying to make carbon copies of our source material. We are trying to emulate them as closely as possible. So just something to think about. Once again, you can choose to use an entire image or you can crop the image, but cropping does not necessarily make it easier. Right. Other good imagery, you can choose to do a border. I think on my example, I might do a border, I'm not sure. It's a pretty easy thing to do just by measuring from the corners in. If you choose to do that, people do enjoy that for a more finished look sometimes. Or take it all the way to the border, nothing wrong with that. This image, the student was interested in doing just architecture. I believe there's Jesus and the 12 apostles. I don't know if it's the Last Supper, but some sort of gathering under it. But the student was not interested in doing the human figures, and that was fine. There was still enough detail in this image that I think it worked really well. Remember, the Tuesday before midnight due date, when you upload those images, telling me what you're thinking about drawing, this is when that is important to talk about. Say, I want to take a cropping. Will this work? I'll give you feedback on that, determining what I think is the best course of action for these assignments. Remember that Tuesday due date is super important with those images so that we can get a good sense of what we're going to be drawing and then moving forward from there. More good examples. Another good example of a border here. More examples of people taking it all the way out to the corners. There's not really a right or wrong answer there. That is up to you when you get to that point. As always, take good photos. Remember, that's the only way I see your imagery. Okay, so just a review here. You're going to start by taking this link here on week 5, this woodcut link. From here, you're going to find an extensive amount of his woodblock prints. Some of these are going to work better than others. Do keep in mind this is a 2-week long project, so something like this would not be a good choice with just text. Let's not do something like that. But something with dense imagery and space would be a great option. Remember, we're going to be filling an 18 by 24 inch piece of paper. This first week focusing on graphite, and then the second week we are going to ink these drawings. This is a really tall, long one. I've had someone do the top and the bottom of this, just cutting it off here and saying this is a composition, or cutting it off here and just doing the griffin at the bottom. Remember, you can choose to crop a certain portion of an image um, rather than doing the entire image. I've had another good set of people doing this one here. Once again, dig through here, spend a few minutes. There are a lot of good imageries to pull from. From there, Tuesday before midnight, you are going to submit 2 or 3 images with the title and date and 2 to 3 sentences on each why you think that would be successful or might not be successful. Give me a pro and con for each image. So there might be an area that you're worried about in the image. Remember, you don't have to draw everything exactly as is, but we are going to take the majority of that composition and use a gridding technique to translate that image. Coming back here, obviously the lecture that we just looked at, always be looking at. The video is super important this week, watching that and how we break down a source material and then start sketching. And then remember, just like last week with the turn example here, when we submit work, and this is for this week here, we will put that ruler next to that 18 by 24 inch drawing paper just to make sure things have been sketched properly on the correct medium. Okay. So remember, first step this week is going to be going to the list of Albrecht Dürer prints and finding imagery that you are interested in working with. From there, Tuesday before midnight, you will submit that to the discussion board. That will be the only discussion board this week. There will be no feedback to other people. Just that submission will be the entire grade. I will get back to you by Wednesday or Thursday on what image I think will work best for you. And then keep in mind for the next 2 weeks on this longer project, it will be a Sunday by midnight due date rather than a Friday by midnight due date, which gives you a little bit more time working into these projects. Okay. Remember, look at the imagery, upload that your choices before Tuesday by midnight. I'll give you feedback. And then through the video, you're going to be sketching in graphite and breaking down that image for this first week. The second week, we will take that exact same drawing, that's sketching in graphite, and we will ink the drawing and actually finish the drawing next week. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Good luck with all of your prelim work. Email if you have questions. And just remember, if you are intimidated by all of the imagery, that's okay. This is the first assignment that usually people impress themselves. And I promise if you follow directions and approach the drawing in the way that I recommend, even if you're intimidated and you think that the drawing is not going to turn out as well as you think, if you take your time and follow directions, it is usually a really successful piece. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Email with questions. And yeah, good luck digging through some Albrecht Dürer woodcuts. They're going to turn into beautiful drawings. Thanks, everybody.